I never thought I would become the kind of person who battles an HOA president, but then again, I never thought I would meet someone like Karen Hendricks. When I moved into Meadowbrook Estates, I was looking for peace and quiet. I had just sold my consulting firm and wanted a place to decompress, somewhere leafy and calm. The neighborhood seemed perfect, tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and a community pool I would probably never use. What I did not anticipate was that our HOA president would turn my life into a bureaucratic nightmare over the most absurd grievances imaginable. Karen was one of those people who seemed to have been born clutching a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws. She was in her mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in pastel cardigans and khaki pants, her blonde hair shellacked into an unmoving helmet. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a custom license plate that read, HOA Queen, which should have been my first warning sign. But I was new, optimistic, and frankly too tired from the move to pay attention to the red flags. The first time I met Karen was at a neighborhood welcoming committee meeting that I had not asked to attend. She simply appeared at my door one Saturday morning with a clipboard and a smile that did not reach her eyes. Hello and welcome to Meadowbrook Estates. I am Karen Hendricks, your HOA president. I am here to go over some important community guidelines with you. Before I could even offer her coffee, she was inside my house, pointing out that my welcome mat was a 1/4 inch too wide according to Section 7.3 of the Aesthetic Guidelines. Now, if you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. Trust me, you will not want to miss how this plays out, and your support helps me bring you more wild HOA tales every week. Now back to Karen and her reign of suburban terror. The welcome mat incident was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Karen found reasons to cite me for violations I did not even know existed. My mailbox was apparently 3 inches too far to the left. My trash cans were visible from the street for 7 minutes, longer than the allowed window on collection day. I received a formal warning because my porch light was, quote, excessively bright, at 400 lumens when the maximum was 350. Each violation came with a typed letter, hand-delivered to my mailbox, with highlighted sections of the bylaws and Karen's signature in aggressive blue ink. I tried the reasonable approach first. I adjusted my mailbox. I set alarms to bring in my trash cans. I even changed my porch light bulb. But Karen was insatiable. Every time I fixed one issue, she found another. When I planted flowers in my front yard, she claimed they were not on the pre-approved species list. When I painted my shutters, she said the shade of gray was too dark by 2% according to her color analyzer. Yes, she actually owned a device for measuring paint colors. The turning point came when Karen decided that people were driving too fast through our neighborhood. Now, to be fair, Meadowbrook Estates did have some families with young children, and safety was important. But Karen's solution was not to request speed bumps through proper channels or organize a neighborhood watch. No, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands in the most Karen way possible. It started with her standing at the end of her driveway with a radar gun. She would clock every car that passed, glaring at drivers, and making exaggerated notes on her clipboard. Several neighbors told me they had received handwritten citations from Karen, completely unofficial of course, demanding they slow down or face HOA consequences. When people ignored her homemade tickets, Karen escalated. One morning, I was driving home from the grocery store, carefully observing the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, when I noticed orange traffic cones appearing throughout the neighborhood. They were placed randomly, forcing cars to slow down and weave between them. At the base of each cone was a small laminated sign that read, Karen Hendricks HOA Safety Initiative. I had to admit, the cones were annoying but relatively harmless. I figured Karen would get bored or someone would complain and they would disappear. But Karen did not get bored. She got more creative and significantly more dangerous. The following week, I was driving home from dinner with a friend when I turned onto Maple Drive, one of the main streets through our neighborhood. My headlights caught something stretched across the road, a glint of metal teeth reflecting in the darkness. I slammed on my brakes, my heart hammering, as I realized what I was looking at. Spike strips. Actual police-grade spike strips, the kind used to stop fleeing vehicles, laid across the residential street. I sat in my car, stunned, as I watched Karen emerge from behind a hedge, wearing a reflective safety vest and holding a flashlight. "Excuse me, you are going 28 miles per hour in a 25 zone. I am going to need to see your license and registration." She was completely serious. She had set up spike strips in our neighborhood and was attempting to conduct traffic stops like she was law enforcement. I very carefully backed up my car, turned around, and immediately called 911. The operator seemed skeptical at first. "Ma'am, did you say someone put spike strips across a residential street?" I assured her that yes, that was exactly what I was saying, and that the person responsible was currently playing crossing guard in a safety vest. The operator told me to stay away from the area and that officers were being dispatched immediately. What happened next became neighborhood legend. 3 police cars arrived within minutes, lights flashing, and found Karen in the middle of the street with her spike strips, radar gun, and clipboard. Apparently, she had purchased actual law enforcement surplus equipment online and had set up her unauthorized checkpoint on multiple streets throughout Meadowbrook Estates. When the officers asked her what she thought she was doing, Karen launched into a speech about HOA authority and her responsibility to keep the neighborhood safe. The police did not share her interpretation of HOA powers. Karen was arrested on the spot, charged with creating a public hazard, reckless endangerment, and impersonating a law enforcement officer. The spike strips had already damaged 2 other cars before I encountered them, and those homeowners were furious. As Karen was being placed in the back of a police car, still arguing that she had every right to enforce traffic laws as HOA president, I watched from a safe distance with a mixture of shock and vindication. But here is where my background became relevant. Before I sold my consulting firm, I specialized in corporate governance and legal compliance. I had connections with lawyers, real estate developers, and municipal officials throughout the state. And I had the resources to make sure Karen's spike strip incident became much more than just a temporary embarrassment. The day after Karen's arrest, I started making phone calls. First, I contacted an attorney friend who specialized in HOA law. I explained the situation and asked about the liability implications for Meadowbrook Estates. With Karen as president, our HOA was potentially liable for her actions, which could affect everyone's property values and insurance rates. My attorney was very interested in this angle. Next, I reached out to the 2 homeowners whose vehicles had been damaged by the spike strips. I offered to connect them with my attorney, free of charge, to pursue claims against Karen personally and the HOA board for negligent oversight. They were very grateful and very angry. Turned out one of them was a journalist for the local newspaper, and she was extremely interested in writing about an HOA president who had installed spike strips to enforce speed limits. Then I did something that would have seemed excessive if Karen had not literally tried to destroy my tires with police equipment. I pulled my records of every single violation notice Karen had ever sent me, all 37 of them over 6 months. I hired a different attorney to review each one for validity. Turns out, Karen had been making up violations that did not exist in our bylaws, misinterpreting rules to suit her preferences, and conducting enforcement actions without proper board approval. In other words, she had been operating as a dictator rather than a president. I compiled all of this information and presented it at an emergency HOA board meeting that I formally requested. The meeting was packed with neighbors who had their own Karen horror stories. One by one, people stood up and shared how Karen had harassed them, fined them unjustly, and made their lives miserable. The spike strip incident had broken the dam, and everyone was ready to talk. But I saved my best move for the actual board vote. You see, I had done my homework. I discovered that Karen had never been officially elected as HOA president. She had simply appointed herself 5 years ago when the previous president moved away, and no one had challenged her because, frankly, no one wanted the job. According to our bylaws, this made her entire presidency illegitimate. Every fine she had issued, every rule she had enforced, every violation notice she had sent, all of it was done without proper authority. I stood up during the meeting and presented a motion, documented with legal citations and bylaw references. First, to declare Karen's presidency null and void due to lack of proper election. Second, to reverse every fine and violation she had issued during her unauthorized tenure. Third, to pursue legal action against Karen personally for the funds she had collected in illegitimate fines, which totaled over $15,000 from various homeowners. And fourth, to permanently ban her from holding any HOA position or serving on any committee. The room went silent as I laid out each point, backed by documentation and legal opinion. The remaining board members, who had essentially been Karen's rubber stamps, looked at each other nervously. They knew that if they did not act, they could be personally liable for enabling her behavior. The vote was unanimous. Karen Hendricks was officially removed from all HOA authority, and every action she had taken for the past 5 years was under legal review. But wait, it gets better. Remember that journalist neighbor whose car was damaged? Her article ran in the local paper with the headline, HOA President Arrested for Vigilante Spike Strip Operation. It included a photo of Karen in her safety vest being arrested, details about her unauthorized presidency, and interviews with multiple homeowners about her reign of terror. The story was picked up by regional news outlets, and then by a national news blog that specialized in absurd HOA stories. Karen became internet famous, but not in the way she wanted. Memes circulated showing her mugshot with captions like, HOA President Takes Speed Enforcement Seriously, and When You Take HOA Rules Too Far. Her full name was associated with the incident, which meant that a simple online search would forever connect her to the spike strip debacle. Meanwhile, the criminal charges proceeded. Karen hired an attorney who tried to argue that she had been acting in her capacity as HOA president to ensure neighborhood safety. The prosecutor pointed out that HOA presidents do not have the authority to deploy police equipment on public streets, and that her actions had endangered numerous residents. Karen was facing significant fines and possible jail time. Then came the civil lawsuits. The 2 homeowners with damaged vehicles sued her for repairs and emotional distress. I led a class action lawsuit on behalf of all homeowners who had paid illegitimate fines during her unauthorized presidency. Karen's legal fees were mounting, and she was forced to list her house for sale to cover the costs. But here is where my revenge became truly poetic. Remember all those violations Karen had cited me for? The mailbox placement, the trash can timing, the porch light brightness, the flower species, the shutter color? I had documented every single one. And now that her presidency was declared illegitimate, I filed a harassment claim against her personally, citing each instance as evidence of a pattern of targeted harassment. My attorney argued that Karen had singled me out from the moment I moved in, subjecting me to an unreasonable level of scrutiny that exceeded what other homeowners experienced. We quantified the time and money I had spent addressing her fake violations, the stress and anxiety her constant monitoring had caused, and the damage to my peaceful enjoyment of my property. The claim was for $50,000 in damages. Karen's attorney tried to dismiss it, but the evidence was overwhelming. I had saved every letter, every email, every documented interaction. I had photos timestamped showing how I had complied with her demands, only to receive new violation notices days later. I even had a spreadsheet tracking the frequency and nature of her complaints compared to other homeowners. The data showed that I received violations at a rate 4 times higher than the neighborhood average, despite being one of the most compliant residents. The harassment case was settled out of court. Karen's insurance would not cover it since it was personal conduct, not HOA business. She was forced to liquidate assets to pay the settlement, including selling her beloved white Lexus with the HOA Queen plates. But the absolute pinnacle of this revenge was still to come. You see, when Karen put her house on the market, it attracted a very interested buyer. Someone who wanted to invest in the neighborhood and become an active community member. Someone who had the means to pay cash and close quickly. That someone was me. I bought Karen's house. Her house, the one she had lived in for 15 years, the one she had ruled the neighborhood from, the command center of her HOA empire. I paid slightly above asking price to ensure my offer was accepted quickly. And the best part? According to our HOA bylaws, which I had now read more carefully than Karen ever did, there was a provision that allowed any property owner to rent their property to tenants with board approval. As one of the new board members, I approved my own application to rent Karen's former house to a very specific tenant, a friend of mine who ran a rehabilitation program for young adults transitioning out of difficult situations. Nice kids who were working hard to get their lives together, but who definitely did not fit Karen's vision of the right kind of people for Meadowbrook Estates. They would be respectful, follow all rules, and maintain the property beautifully. But Karen would have absolutely hated it. Karen had to be out of her house 30 days after closing. I made sure to be there on moving day, not to gloat, but to inspect my new investment property. She was loading boxes into a rental truck, her hair no longer perfectly styled, no safety vest or clipboard in sight. When she saw me, her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and then pure horror as she realized what had happened. "You bought my house?" she stammered. "But why would you?" I smiled politely. "It is a great property in a wonderful neighborhood. I am sure my tenants will love it here. By the way, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" She looked like she might cry. "For what?" "For teaching me the importance of really understanding HOA bylaws. Turns out there are a lot of interesting provisions in there when you actually read them properly. Have a nice day, Karen." I watched as the realization washed over her face. She had lost everything: her house, her power, her reputation, her money, all because she could not stop herself from escalating. The spike strips had been her downfall, but it was her years of petty tyranny that ensured no one would defend her when she needed it most. She had used the rules as weapons for so long that she never considered someone might actually understand those rules better than she did. Karen stood in the driveway of the house that was no longer hers, holding a box of belongings, as I walked through the front door I now owned. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She finally understood that her need for control, her addiction to petty power, and her decision to literally spike strip her own neighborhood had led to the complete dismantling of everything she had built. She had played HOA dictator and lost to someone who actually knew how to use the system properly. And if you enjoyed seeing Karen get exactly what she deserved, please smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more stories of entitled people facing epic consequences. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Would you have bought her house too? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is just understanding the rules better than your opponent does.